good afternoon, man. Oh man, DJ John Lyon coming in doing little ones and trees, got the place going hard. Now I gotta say big shouts out to the Women's Coalition because they got a lot going on. And if you don't know by now, it's Tuesday. Silence Speaks, Secrets Revealed, and I remember this time. I didn't have to look inside. I had to remember this time. Good afternoon, Miss Gums. How are you doing today?
I am fine. Thank you for remembering, man. I changed my shirt just for you. We had a flash mob earlier. I had on a purple shirt. I'm like, I gotta wear the shirts. That's gonna say the wrong thing, but you did well.
Yeah,
see, you need to change. You need to change jobs.
No. You need to just take my job.
No, but you're so good at it. You're so good.
I can never do your job.
And I can't do yours.
All right, so this is what's going on today. Silence Speaks, Secrets Revealed. Do you want to introduce what it is, or do you want to just go ahead and play the show?
No, go ahead and play the show.
All right, so
warning, this one's touchy.
How touchy?
Touchy.
Touchy? Mm-hmm. Okay. We don't like touchy.
Croix presents Silence Speaks, Secrets Revealed, a radio drama about child sexual abuse. It contains subject matter that may be triggering for survivors. Discretion is advised.
Here I must take pause. I see Leah and Caridad going about their lives. They pretend everything is okay. Leah has opened up to her therapist. Caridad grows disruptive at home and school. And Beto, well, let's see.
Beto, my love, where are you? Aquí, mommy. What? I thought you were outside. I can't keep you in the house. Now I can't get you outside. What is wrong, Beto?
Nothing. I just don't want to play.
But what about Michael Jackson?
I don't care. He's just a stupid chicken.
I don't know what is wrong with you. I made flan. Come eat some. I say something funny to make me laugh. You and your sister are what I love more than the sun and the moon and the stars. You know that, right? I'd do anything for you, Norberto.
I know. I don't want any flan.
Come here.
Ouch!
What? I barely touch you, Beto. What is wrong with you?
My belly hurts. Leave me alone.
You're a little boy, and I am your mother. Let me see. Ay. Oh my God. Oh my God. Beto, who did this to you? Oh my God, my boy.
I can't say anything. He'll kill you. He will kill you. I don't want him to die, mommy.
What is the trouble in here? All this noise. Madre de Dios, en nombre del Padre y el Hijo y del Espíritu Santo.
No, Beto, I will kill him and your father will kill him again. Beto, baby.
I get his shoes. You have to take him to the doctor. Rápido.
The majority of child sexual abuse cases have no physical evidence. It is usually a touch, saying obscene things, showing inappropriate pictures, taking pictures of children, and other contact that cannot be detected. In some cases, the trauma is clear and painful. All of these children will grow to adulthood and still suffer in varying degrees from their experiences.
Thank you for listening to Silence Speaks, Secrets Revealed. If you or someone you know has been sexually abused, please dial 911 in an emergency or call the Women's Coalition at 340-773-927.
Well, good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the After Show Let's Talk About It, a live call-in talk show to continue discussing the weekly episodes of Silence Speaks, Secrets Revealed, a radio drama about child sexual abuse presented by the Women's Coalition of St. Croix. The stories are fiction based on fact. I'm your host, Shalene Gums, and today with us we have Dr. Anthony Ricketts, pediatrician.
Good
Welcome,
afternoon.
Dr. Ricketts.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. Just so that we remember, and I get this out of the way because I'm trying to be good at this. It's a call-in show. So the number is 773-3636. 773-FM. No, I'm not coming for your job. You're too good at it. But call in if you have any questions. So Dr. Ricketts, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then I'll get into some questions.
All right, thank you so much. First, I must say it's very refreshing to work with the Women's Coalition of St. Croix. I know they've been doing such wonderful work. I've been involved with a few people individually, but then as an entity, I think the work that's being done can never be underestimated. So I'm very humbled being here with you today. I've been a pediatrician for close to about 30 years, and I've been here in St. Croix for about 20 of those years. So the majority of my time as a pediatrician has been spent here in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands. I'm in private practice, and we've been open to the community ever since we started I think it was in about 2000.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. So we'll get into the reason why Dr. Ricketts is here is because he's a medical doctor and a pediatrician, and this is about child sexual abuse. So could you tell us what are some of the physical signs of abuse on a child? And this is physical signs of abuse in general. We'll get into the specifics after.
Okay. I think when we talk about abuse of a child, there are different types of abuse. And of course, the easiest one to spot would be signs of physical abuse, but we also have sexual abuse, we also have neglect and emotional abuse. So a child could be abused in numerous ways, but generally what you would see very clearly in a child who has been physically abused, especially if they've been hit or if they've been caused to hit something or pushed, you would see bruises on the body. But the difference that we usually see with children who are abused over a period of time is that you would see injuries or bruises that are different stages of healing and they're unexplainable. So this is one of the number one signs you would see. Any child could fall, get bruised, break a bone, but if you see 2 or 3 injuries, like 3 different fractures of the bone that are different stages of healing, that really starts to add up. Or if a child is bruised, you see a fresh bruise, and then you see a bruise that's a little in a more developed stage of healing, then you start to ask questions. Is this child just very clumsy, or when they come with stories that do not match what you see? So if for example we say, oh, he fell down a bunch of stairs, but then he has 3 fractured ribs on 3 stairs, then you get really concerned. This doesn't really match up. Other signs that I think parents or caregivers should look for include any injuries that are very symmetrical. So for example, if you hold a child 2 hands and you squeeze them, or you shake a child, or you put a child in hot water, you have symmetrical type of injuries. Things like cigarette burns around, using a belt buckle. You see the shape of the belt buckle. Most injuries that are accidental do not generally have very smooth edges or do not look like an object. So you would see you fall down the stairs, you have bruises all over. But if you're hit with a buckle, of course you would see the shape of the buckle and the line of the belt. So those are just a few things that kind of clue us in or make us a little more concerned that something is going on.
All right. So pay attention if you see injuries upon injuries. That's black and blue on a black and blue. Pay attention to that. So I know that some illnesses are indicative of abuse, but they may not necessarily be like bruises. So I know for one instance, there was this child that all of a sudden they developed hypertension. Are those signs of stress, or can those be indicators of the fact that maybe there's some abuse going, or maybe neglect, like you said, like wrong foods, that kind of stuff?
Sometimes there's a very thin line between what presents as abuse and what could be true de facto medical problems. So, for example, stomach ache is a complaint that probably every child that has complained of at one point or the other. So we see a lot of children who come in complaining of abdominal pain. My stomach hurts, and they say this continuously. And so, sometimes there's a medical reason for it, but a lot of times you could do all the tests, you could do all the examinations, go to the doctor numerous times, and you don't find anything. Sometimes that could be a sign of stress. Headaches could also present as a sign of stress, complain of constant headaches. And a lot of these symptoms are not necessarily being made up by the child. The child actually feels these symptoms. So if you have a child that previously wasn't complaining of or wasn't ill or never had any medical problems, but then constantly is complaining, and you're seeing the child in the doctor's office, every week, every month, consistently, and you're not finding anything, then you definitely have to start thinking, is there something going on, stress-like? It could be any other thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be abuse. It could be a death in the family or other stressors. I think it would be interesting to mention one thing at this point, a syndrome called Munchausen. And this is something that is much more common than we think. Munchausen is a situation where you cause yourself medical situations to get attention. So you might, for example, run and hit your head on a wall and fall down, and someone comes to find you. Now, where it involves a child is called Munchausen by proxy. So you do these things to the child so that you get attention. And we've had cases here on the island where caregivers have done things to the child, like you pinch the child, or you press the child's stomach, or you make the child vomit. You give the child things to make them vomit or have diarrhea, or put them out in the cold, and then bring them in lethargic, and tell us the child is sick. So that's another form of abuse that we should be aware of. It's Munchausen by proxy, and you can find those situations especially in children who are well most of the time, but as soon as they're either alone with one particular person, that person always raises the alarm. Oh, the child is sick, and it could be anybody.
Okay, so that would be something to look for, because I can see how that can be used very much in grooming, and how it can play out. Because if I'm the only person that's making the child sick, and everybody thinks that they're only sick around that, but that gives me would give a perpetrator a really, really good opportunity to start the grooming process.
Exactly.
Because then the child is always sick.
Exactly.
So if anything else happens, the child is always sick anyway. So it's a very, very nice cover-up, which isn't good. And unfortunately it happens a lot. So remember, it's a call-in show, 773-FM, 773-3636.
I'm actually reading up on it right now about Munchausen by, I hope I'm
proxy.
saying by proxy. I hope I'm saying that. Munchausen? I'm saying that right? All right. So one of the things it says the cause is unknown. What I'm reading here is it may stem from experience with emotional trauma or childhood abuse, or from personality disorder, according to the NHS, which notes that notes that generally those affected seek attention. Munchausen by proxy sometimes involves people who have a history of faking personal illness themselves.
Right.
So one of our, they really don't know what causes, but you can basically see the symptoms start from the person already having their own case of Munchausen
issues,
Right.
And then they extend it to the child, because obviously when you bring a child into the picture, there is some degree of you feel the person is responsible, you think they're doing the right thing, and all the attention is brought to the suffering that the caregiver is going through because their child is sick. So you're very sympathetic to the caregiver, the mother, the father, whoever it is that's perpetrating this situation, and they get a lot of attention and sympathy.
And attention and sympathy is usually one of the things that we know that batterers, abusers, perpetrators, pedophiles, they like. Well, for two reasons. One, it makes that everybody's paying attention to them and never think that they do anything wrong. And if I think that you can never do anything wrong because you're this wonderful, caring person, it's very easy to get away with other stuff. Because then when the 3-year-old is like, well, he touched my whatever, not using the correct words because their language is limited, then nobody really believes the child. You know what I mean? Because the other person's getting the attention. And so that runs us into a lot of other issues, which is unfortunate because at this point the child's the only one that's getting hurt, really.
Absolutely. Now, Doc, I would like to ask you, it's okay, I call you Doc?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now, another thing, what's the difference between like a hypochondriac and somebody suffering from Munchausen disease?
Okay, well, a hypochondriac is someone who persistently seeks medical attention, and they truly believe that there's something wrong with them.
Okay. It's more like anxiety.
It's sort of an anxiety situation, but it's very, and you don't necessarily have to injure yourself to get that attention. So for example, somebody who's a hypochondriac would come to the doctor and say, my chest was hurting me yesterday. I couldn't breathe, and then you come in, you check him, you do all the tests, everything is fine. You say, well, if it happens again, then he comes in, he says, well, it wasn't on the right side this time, but it was in my back, and I couldn't walk. And then you check him again. In those cases, they don't necessarily injure themselves, they just seek medical attention on a constant, because for some reason, they do have this propensity to feel that there's something wrong. And the more you tell them there's nothing wrong, the more they feel there's something wrong.
Okay.
In people who have Munchausen, they actually injure themselves, or they injure the child.
So they know there's nothing wrong.
They know there's nothing wrong.
And they create it.
Yeah, they create it. As long as they are alone with the child, they will do something that would enable them to seek attention. So they wouldn't come with a child, for example, who is perfectly fine. They will show you something. Or they would say, I came in, I saw him, he was screaming and making all this noise. But then what the person did was they squeezed their leg, or they did something to cause the child to cry.
All right. Okay, so getting back to what was happening in the episode, what are some specific physical signs that parents or caretakers can see on infants or small children to show that they're being sexually abused?
All right, so sexual abuse, I think, is in a different category on its own. And sexual abuse is one of those things where it could take many forms. So, for example, you could have a child who is sexually abused without a single physical sign. Sexual abuse would include if you are showing inappropriate material to a child, if you're exposing yourself to a child, or if a child is being made to expose themselves inappropriately, or you're speaking in ways that, or joking in a way that's inappropriate for a child of that age.
Right.
So, when we say sexual abuse, I know a lot of people think about the physical, but you could sexually abuse a child by just being inappropriate around a child.
Right.
Because obviously a child who's 7, as in this case, is it's inappropriate to even speak in certain ways or adult ways around a child that age. So that's sexual abuse also. But the physical signs that you would see generally would include anything that to the lay person would be inappropriate. For example, in a girl, you wouldn't expect, for example, a 7 or 13-year-old to be pregnant. So let's just be extreme. A 13-year-old who's pregnant, or a 13-year-old who has a sexually transmitted disease, obviously, there's been an inappropriate behavior. But then bruising, inappropriate or unexplained bruising. And again, we have to be very careful as caregivers, or we as the protectors or the social workers get involved with things like, for example, if a young lady does a lot of horse riding, you could have some abnormality, which we could all say, oh well, it's this or it's that, but we need to be very clear as to what are we looking for, and how do those injuries or how do those physical abnormalities get there. And if there's an explanation for it, then it's fine. Sometimes you might have a mom who's overzealous in cleaning, and it might cause some inflammation, some bruising. And if the mom says, oh yeah, I did this, that has to be taken into consideration. But any inappropriate bruising, the hymen in a young lady before the age of sexual activity is usually very smooth and round. So a hymen that's not smooth and round is questionable. Again, there might be situations where it's completely legitimate that it happened, but hymen is smooth and round, there's no bruising, and you do not really have any sexually transmitted disease that would cause a discharge. Discharges happen in young ladies too, so obviously that has to take into consideration. Oral, bruising within the mouth, and rectal. Of course, you always have to do a rectal exam for unexplained bruising, cuts, tears. Happens sometimes also. But I think majority of the time we have to remember too that even if there's physical contact, it could just be inappropriate touching. could be touching of any of the genitalia, breast, vaginal area, and it wouldn't, there are no marks left. So sometimes parents could come in and say, I wanted to check my child. I think somebody has been inappropriate with her. It doesn't necessarily mean that the physician would see anything. It could just be, it could be perfectly normal, but that child has been sexually abused. So those are considerations we have to put in place when we have those questions. I'll just mention very briefly, in terms of when we ask children what happened, a 7-year-old, as in this young man's case, can be you can make him answer whichever way you want him to answer by the way you ask the question. So as much as I want to believe that something happened, I could ask him in a way that makes him say something happened.
Yeah.
Not purposely.
Yeah, I think they call it leading. The questions are leading.
So you could ask leading questions. So I could say, how did Mr. A touch you? I did not ask whether he touched you or not. And children have a lot of children who have dinosaurs and imaginary friends, and they could make things happen. So they could form ideas, and they could truly believe what they're telling you. They're not lying, they just believe what they're saying to you. So we have to be very careful as we ask questions and allow
That's why
people...
we should get the professionals to ask the questions.
Right, like people who, like social workers, and if you repeatedly ask questions, a story will form in their mind. I've seen it happen a lot of times where if you ask them and you ask them and you ask them, they will tell you what you want to hear. If you're a parent and
Just to get you to shut up.
Yeah, well, to make you happy.
Right.
To make you happy.
Right, for you to, because in the case of Beto, in the story that we just listened to, his mother asked him why he wasn't outside. He said, my belly's hurting, leave me alone. But then when she checked him, he had physical pain, and obviously it was a lot more than a bellyache.
Right.
But his description of what happened to him was that his belly was hurting.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's with the language with children. I mean, to go along with what you said about the leading questions, a lot of times the way they word stuff anyway is based on their vocabulary. And they have limited vocabulary.
Right.
And so they don't really know how to explain it. And in the episode before with Beto, he was being shown pictures. And so because he was being shown pictures, the grooming had already started for him.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so him being touched at this point was just a follow-up to what had happened. And so it's very easy for, and I guess that's where a lot of times we argue about the criminal justice system, because the police have to ask these questions, and then the attorneys have to ask the questions, and then children here don't get a chance to not be in front of the person that's done something to them, and then their attorney gets to ask them questions in front of the person that's done something to them. So it really makes it difficult. It really makes it difficult. We're running out of time. So in terms of, and I think you covered some of it, in terms of what ways we can recognize it in teenagers and older children, in infants and children whose languages are different, but in teenagers and older children, if they're being physically abused, do they have the same signs, or are those signs different? More because they're bigger? How would the signs be different from an infant and a young child to a teenager and an older child?
I think with with older kids, there's definitely inappropriate behavior also. So usually it's a sudden change in behavior. So someone who was outgoing now becomes very quiet, or someone who was very quiet becomes aggressive. Inappropriate clothes. So like you would see, it's a hot day, and they're wearing clothes with their necks covered, or long sleeves when they previously didn't wear long sleeves. Covering their wrists, covering their backs, their arms. You'd also see situations in which they start to act out. So you would see young girls who, were relatively quiet or not outgoing, become very aware of the opposite sex, and boys also being very aware of the opposite sex. You would have changes in grade, attention in school, things that used to bring them a lot of happiness and joy, like family, friends, and things like that. They become reclusive. So a change in behavior is one thing that we should definitely look for. in the older kids, there's a tendency to be able to justify or explain the situation, which is inappropriate, but it's happening. So they find a way to live with it and justify it, and maybe look at it as something that probably should be happening or is not a problem. And so sometimes it takes a long time before you find out what actually happened. A lot of them run away from home because at home there's a greater chance of being found out. Some, like you had in Vito's case, they're threatened with violence, and the violence is a lot of times not towards the child but towards someone they love. So I'll kill your mom, or I'll say this about you, or I'll tell everyone. So a sense of shame, you know, if you tell people about this, I will look bad, not necessarily the person who was perpetrating the crime.
Okay, I see Carrie got down, so that means
Hi,
Carolyn has.
Carolyn, I'm here. I just have a
Hi,
quick
Carol.
question for Dr. Ricketts. So if I brought one of my sons in and I thought that maybe they were being abused, talk to me about, can you walk us through what you would do in the exam room, and then what's your obligation to report?
Right. So any child who's brought in with the concern that there's been abuse, we go through the same process we would go through for any complaint. So the initial thing you do is you have the presenting complaint and then the history of the presenting complaint. So you really want to go into detail as to why there's the concern that this child is being abused, who the perpetrator, we assume the perpetrator is, when this happened, if it's something that has been going on for a long period, or if this is just something that happened now, signs or other reasons why you think that this is actually what was going on. And then the situation in the home, so like some family history, history of the caregivers, you know, the parents, school. And then you really want to get a good sense, which sometimes is difficult in just one visit, as to the environment the child is being raised in. So once that is done, and usually we would want to do this away from the child. And I personally do my best not to interrogate the child. So I'm not going to say, you know, who did this? Why, you know, where did they touch you? How did they touch you? You know, how long? Who was it? You know, because by the time you repeatedly do this,
Right.
a story becomes very clear in their mind that it was Uncle X or it was Auntie B that did it. And it just sticks. And it might not be true. I have seen situations like that where it was completely impossible for the person the child said to have done it. The person was physically not even there. So after that's done, then we do a physical examination, and of course the things we mentioned, you know, either it's present or absent, or absent. In the case of sexual abuse, a rape kit is definitely one of the things that's always recommended. We do have that in the emergency room. So if it's a young lady or a young male, a rape kit is done.
Can you do that in your office or
No.
no? So it has to be, a rape kit has to be done. If it's done, it has to be done in the emergency room.
Right. A rape kit has legal implications, one, and there is a chain of custody. It has to be done in a very specific way, and whoever handles the package or the evidence, it has to be documented in a certain way. So they're usually done in the emergency room. It's usually in instances where there's a claim of rape. So if there's the concern that, you know, that has happened in a child, then a rape kit is done. You know, you look for things like STDs, which would completely be inappropriate in a 7-year-old. You look for evidence of fiber DNA evidence and things like that, and look for hairs and things. So the rape kit is done, and then of course everybody in those types of situations need counseling. As we know, I'm sure we all know, most of this abuse and sexual misconduct is done by people that the child knows. So the concern is always, do you send this child back home with the parents? You know, a determination has to be made, the parents or the caregivers. Do they go back in the same situation where you think that this occurred? Do they have to be relocated until the investigation is done and the results are known? so I think it's a very involved situation. It has to be done very specifically.
And as a private physician, you make the referral to Human Services
Oh, yes,
as a
Human-
mandatory reporter?
Yes, definitely. Human Services, a lot of times what would happen, as we've seen in some cases, is Human Services would actually bring the child to the office. If we have a child that there has been